good afternoon, good evening, and late good evening to all of you who are listening to us this morning. We are in Atlanta here. Thank you for joining us. Chai and Just Chat, the September session. This is our 5th year into Chai and Just Chat sessions. So our sponsors today are Vendorship Inc. and My Genomics. And what Vendorship Inc. does is end-to-end solutions providing government solutions in the US. And My Genomics, it's located in Alpharetta. It does RT-PCR tests and is open 7 days a week. And please check out their website, My Genomics. And some of the people I know have actually gone and tested there as well. So thank you for sponsoring. But the main people I have to thank are the panelists today who are joining from across the world. Even it's late evenings, and one of the doctors just finished his call, and also another doctor finished his transplant surgery and is straight into our session. So this just shows the dedication of why some physicians get into this field. Yeah, and today we might be speaking some sensitive information. It might trigger reactions, so it might become emotional at times. Please be cautious and stay strong while viewing the entire discussion. Let me introduce our panelists today. We have Dr. Riyadh A.S. Fadil, please correct me if I'm getting the name wrong, is a professor of urology and transplant surgery. He joined Hamad Medical Center as a senior consultant surgeon in 2004 and is currently the director of the Qatar organization Transplant Center or Donation Center at HIBA and the Doha International Academy of Organ Donation. So you were elected, Dr. Riyadh, to the WHO Task Force on Donation and Transplantation of Human Organs and Tissues. That's a huge position. We respect you for that. I think you really you get to gain so much information from across the world. What that task force does is also into Society Ethics Committee, and also you are on Declaration of Istanbul Custodian Group Board of Counselors. Oh my gosh, we would love to hear your story, Dr. Riyadh, further. And thank you again for being so humble and accepting this invitation, though in spite of your busy schedule. We appreciate you.
I'm a pleasure to be with such distinguished panelists. I am happy to be with you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yeah. Next, we have Dr. Tom Cherian, and so the ironic part or the good part that I'm very excited is I'm actually seeing Dr. Tom Cherian after like 20 years. So we were in the same medical school. We stayed in that medical school for almost 5.5 years. And, we studied well, we didn't study well. We were all in the same category of sometimes the backbenchers. But, sometimes life takes us in different journey. And here he is, after 20 years, worked in UK for 16 years in King's College, London, and performed over 400 transplants, and has given more than 100 international medical lectures in 5 to 6 countries, and has performed 650 liver transplants in his life. And currently located in Hyderabad. He has done 240 in Hyderabad itself, and some of them are more than 250 are complex liver cancer resections as well. So he performed the first successful liver transplant in several hospitals, including Osmania and GB Pant Hospital, right? And NIMS as well in Hyderabad. He started a liver transplant program in Andhra Pradesh. We would love to hear more about that, Dr. Cherian. I believe it's called South Asian Liver Institute. I would love to hear more what's going on there. You also performed the first successful split liver transplant in Hyderabad. And guess what? He received the Legend in Transplant Surgery Award in 2017. That's huge. We appreciate you for all your efforts. I'm sure you're making a mark in many lives who are going through some dark phases of their life in the family. So thank you, Cherian. And in fact, I feel very proud myself to be called your batchmate. And thank you for taking the time this evening for you in India to join us. We can't wait to hear from you. Rashna is my very good friend from Rashna Thakur. She's also in Atlanta for the last 20 years. And I believe Rashna, she was my intern, and at some point when I was at the county government, and now she's completed her degree from Georgia State University as well as UGA and in Masters in Public Health. I didn't know that you lived in Bangkok, and I didn't know that you had traveled 35 countries. I would love to hear. There's so much more we don't know about other person, but through your education experience, you've gained a global perspective of cultural and social values. You believe in health equity to improve community health. You've volunteered in several non-profit organizations to make a difference. So thank you so much, Rashna, for joining us today as well. Bob Scanlon, thank you for joining us, Bob, this morning, all the way from the West Coast. Yeah, and you are also a board member in the Transplant Community Alliance, which is a non-profit which was founded in 1987, transplantas.com. You have lectured in several University of California postgraduate studies of social works. You've also a former steward for UCLA transplant support group. I'm just reading your profile, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you've received multiple awards. You're a public speaker to thousands in hospitals, nursing colleges. You have also written a book. You're an author of Tigers Under My Bed. That is the life lessons tamed during 3 organ transplants. We can't wait to hear from you, Bob. Though I'm making it very easy, I'm sure there's so much frustrations and emotional things that happen during the transplantation and organ donation phase. We would love to hear from you. You're also, the book has been rated 4.7 stars out of 5. Transitions coach for life and business as well, Bob. So thank you for joining us this morning. Brian, you're the COO, or you've been in several CEO positions in the past. You've owned and managed director over 30 years career in the investment advisory board, and there was a major life-changing health event in 2018, which you will talk to us about, and that's when you joined Synapse. And Synapse is an organization that brings nonprofits together, business-to-business connections. Of course, nonprofits means there's a cause that everyone is working towards. You are residing in Virginia, and your creativity, passion, and energy make you far more than the numbers guy. So I'm not a numbers person, Brian, so we'll connect. Very good. Thank you for joining us from Virginia, Brian. Dr. Govini Balasubramani, Dr. Bala as he's known, is also a senior from my medical school. So, and thank you for joining us. You are a cardiothoracic and heart and lung transplant surgeon. You have trained under world-class transplant surgeons in Hong Kong, Austria, Germany, and South Korea. You are one of the pioneering surgeons in establishing lung transplant and heart and lung transplant program in India, performing surgeries in patients ranging from 17 to 74 years. That's awesome. And you're also proficient in video-assisted thoracic surgery. When we do talk in the later part during the session, if you can tell us a little more about what they are. You're also well versed in minimally invasive cardiac surgery. You have performed more than 7,000 open and closed heart surgeries in adults and children. And for you to sit with us this morning, for us this evening, for you, we're just humbled. All the physicians and the recipients as well as the donors. We would love to hear from each one of you. And not the least, Anil Srivatsa, thank you so much, calls himself a military brat and has found purpose in his life after 30-year-old checkered corporate and entrepreneurial career, right? So he spends 1/4 of his time in a year advocating for organ donation. So he drives around championing the cause of organ donation with the goal of reaching 1 million people. He's almost reached much more, and he's gone across 44 countries, more than 127,000 people, and via over 550 talks. And he's a media guy, radio guy. So radio today, he was a CEO of radio broadcasting. He launched the first talk show format FM radio station in India. He's also a TEDx speaker, co-founder of Radio Wala, and so you're also founder of Sochcast Media. So please look up you will see as soon as you Google his name. And so thank you so much for joining. And also you held the you're a world record holder at the World Transplant Games for 2019. You won the gold for the team in 2019, and also from Bangalore, but currently in Dallas, Texas. So Anil, thank you so much, so much, so much. And audience, thank you for joining us. There is a chat section. Please feel free to ask any questions. We did receive some of your questions when you registered, so thank you. I want to start first with the general questions. Yeah, Rashna, I would like to start with you. What does life mean to you?
And thank you for asking that. To me, life, if I have to sum up in one sentence, it's about what you do for others and how you create your legacy in this world while you're around. So that's what to me life is. It's not just about you, but it's also about the people that you're surrounded by. What at the end of the day, what kind of remark do you want to leave behind?
Very nice, very well said. And Brian, the next question is for you. Who is someone you admire or respect, and why?
Well, I don't know where to start with that. There's so many. Friends of mine and I had the pleasure of knowing a lady named, I'm going to draw a complete blank on her name now that you ask me. She was a former employee of the United Network for Organ Sharing and a big proponent. She was in their marketing program. Lisa. I've got a lot of friends listening in. They're going to be laughing at me for not being able to remember her last name.
It happens to me all the time, Brian. Don't worry.
But she sort of just worked tirelessly in the effort to get more folks to sign up to be organ donors. Being a recipient of that work, it's hard not to look up to someone like that. So I'll think of her name in a second. I'm going to have like 20 friends text me what her last name is right now. So,
people are looking out for you, Brian. That's one of the happiest things in life that can happen. So Dr. Riyad, thank you, Brian. Dr. Riyad, the question is for you, is if you could improve the world by doing one thing, what would you choose to do?
It's equity.
Wow.
And this is what we have achieved here in Qatar. Today, in the surgery, the donor is from Latin America, and the recipient is from India.
Wow.
A Muslim donating to Christian. They don't know each other. And it's really, when I saw the first drop of urine coming out of the kidney, it gave me pride, gave me of what we have achieved in Qatar. Qatar, you don't know it. It's a small country. It's 2.5 million. But 500,000 are Qatari. 2 million are from all nationalities.
Wow.
We are a mix. Indians are more in Qatar than Qatari. So, yes, so many. We are a top 10 nationality. All the top 10 nationality are more than Qatar. So we are a small world. And in 2009, we had only 2 kidneys.
Wow.
Only 2 kidneys. As a frustrated surgeon, you have mentioned that we went to the WHO or the Istanbul Declaration board. This is what took us there, because we have, over the last 11 years, we started a reform in the system, in the law, in the regulation, and we managed to educate the people and make them register for deceased donor.
Very nice.
And now the registry is 500,000 in 10 years. This
Very
is
nice.
25.
This is perfect.
Of the population, of the adult population. So this is it. It's
Very
equity that we have achieved, and equity that we should. This is why we are now in the WHO, because this is our next step.
Okay.
We want to push the organ donation and organ transplantation to the priority of the WHO and make all the nations do the same and follow the what we have done.
Very nice, Dr. Riyad. You've basically shown it in action as well. So we look forward to your leadership and guidance on how that same methodology can be used in other places as well. So the next question is for Dr. Bala. Dr. Bala, are you happy? And what would you change? And you bet me he's the person who's smiling the most, though.
No, we have to do it because if you are in a sorrow mind, then even the patients will not be. They'll be really like you have to be being a doctor. More than a doctor, you have to be like an actor.
Yes.
You should know when to console them, and when there is any trouble, then you have to give them some kind of a support to the patient and patient relatives. That is how you have to console them.
Very well said. Very well said. Thank you so much. Anil, the question is for you. If you were to write a book about yourself, how would you name it?
The punk who bought a caravan and drove the world.
Wow. And
as opposed to the monk who sold his Ferrari.
Great, that already speaks volumes. So thank you so much, Anil. And I'm hoping to get it autographed as well. Yeah? Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay. So, Bob, my question is for you. If you had to choose one family member to be around 24/7 for a week, who would it be?
It would be my son.
Okay.
I've unfortunately lost my wife to cancer. If she were here, she would be the one. But my son and I have had a remarkable bonding, and he's one of the reasons I'm inspired to keep on. It's a great man.
Very nice. Sounds great. Thank you so much. So the final question is so I didn't miss anyone, right? Cherian. I don't want to miss you though. So Cherian, what is your greatest fear and how do you manage fear in general? Dr. Cherian.
I think that's a loaded question. I think my greatest fear would be that I have not made a difference. I feel that we all have purposes in life, and if we have not made a difference to something or somebody, it doesn't have to be a big thing. I think then that would be, in my view, a wasted life, and I would be frightened of that.
Yeah, and we can bet you it's not so, at least from our side, what we see you have accomplished. We continue to wish you the best in doing so. Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone, today. And Bob, I want to start with you with the first question. Yeah. And I might be focusing on US, but please, those from other parts of the world, let me know about other statistics as well. So over 100,000 people in US are waiting for an organ transplant, right? Everybody, this is the statistics for US, right? Unfortunately, many die before even getting that organ, donated. And so basically, I think that statistics is in the US, 20 patients die because of the lack of donor organs every day. So in order for us to go deep dive into the discussions, why, what, when, I want us to discuss the types of transplants, right? I know, I'm not deep into that field, but I know there is organ donation and tissue donation. If you can talk about it further, a little bit more. What are the types of donation?
Well, organ donation is certainly my focus and the main focus of the OPOs in this country. There are roughly 50 OPOs, or organ procurement organizations, that are overseen and by our federal government. So the rules are quite consistent across the country. You're correct that the latest number I heard the other day was 117,000 people on wait lists. And I don't know what the current fall off rate is, but I know back in the day when I was receiving transplants, about 40% of those folks would fall off the list before they received a transplant. One of the things that's helped a lot in recent years has been the promotion of living donors, which of course is essentially kidney donors. In the U.S., kidney transplants represent 83 to 87% in any given year of all transplants. So we now have about 20 to 25% of those transplants are done by living donations, friends and relatives. And you can see just by simple math, that is a huge number of lives saved. One of the things that I'm impressed about, as I was many years in California and now in Arizona, is the generosity of people in making donations. Here in Arizona, we have over 60% of our adult population has voluntarily registered to be organ donors. That's a greater number than have received vaccinations for COVID to protect their own lives. They're looking out for others. And without that, the whole system would be a real disaster, frankly, because obviously those donations are what enabled these brilliant men who are with us here today to do the wonderful surgeries that they do. So the U.S. is probably one of the fewer nations in the world that is strictly voluntary donation. And for a lot of reasons, I personally will hope they will keep it that way.
Okay.
Does that address your question?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Bob. The way we're talking about donation, I think a common general person in the world just hears about monetary donation, right? To non-profit donation. And here for us to talk about actually our organs and tissues, it's sort of putting goosebumps on me. So I would like for Dr. Cherian to talk about what are the organs that can be donated.
So, as Bob was saying, the commonest transplant by far is kidneys. I think everybody knows that all human beings normally would have two kidneys, and it's a very natural course for one of them to be donated to somebody who has chronic kidney disease and renal failure. Then I think the second commonest would be, among solid organs at least, would be liver. Followed by heart and lungs, and then the pancreas. So for many of these organs, these are end-stage disease. Therefore, there is no options for them. Renal disease has dialysis as an option to a certain extent, which doesn't give the quality of life that a transplant would. But for example, in my specialty, liver, or maybe in Dr. Bala's specialty, the heart, there are very little other options if they cannot get an organ in time to replace their failed or failing organ. Of course, there are other rarer transplants, like there has been hand transplants, there has been face transplant, but they have limited use and generally not commonly performed. But I think if you take one organ that has made the biggest difference in the transplant community, I'm sure Brian would agree, it would be kidneys. And Dr. Riyad, I'm sure you agree that is the sheer volume of diabetic nephropathy that is going to hit the world, it just boggles the mind.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much for that answer. So Dr. Bala, the next question is for you. Can you briefly talk about tissue transplants, please?
A deceased donor, he can donate almost 32 of his, including the skin, bone, hand, and then hair, as well as the kidney, liver, 2 lungs. Like that, there are 32 organs he can donate.
Okay, so, very good. And that's what I wanted to ask. So probably these tissue donations are saving lives, like from burn victims who have been burnt, or even cornea for blind people, or allowing people to walk again with tissue, skin graft. Did I get that right? Okay. So as people have been saying we are seeing more generosity in the world recently, and to be a lifesaver, they're starting to give organs as well, not just monetary help. So Anil, tell us, who can be a donor?
Everyone,
Can you
alive and dead. Everyone alive and dead.
okay.
Just to put things in context for the rest of the panelists, well, organ donation stands on 3 strong pillars, and one of them is the social pillar, then the medical pillar, and then the legal pillar. Work more with the social pillar because the very simple prognosis for organ donation is if there are no donors, there is no organ donation. All right, so that's across the board. And we are all first from the social pillar, and then we are professionals. So first we are humans. And my purpose in life, as you call it, everyone needs one, and nothing revives a dying soul than giving it some purpose, and I feel alive. And my purpose in life is to increase the donor pool, living or dead, which is what I do, is to drive around the world, speak to communities, which is why I'm in Dallas right now. I would love to come and talk to any organization anywhere in the world, especially Qatar. I'm really interested, Dr. Riyad, about how you guys work things there.
Okay.
So to answer your question, every human being is a potential donor.
Okay. Let me ask, thank you, Anil. Let me ask Brian and Dr. Riyad this question. How old is too old to donate? And is there an age limit? So suppose 18, or can they decide to make that decision to donate, or can they be much younger as well?
Yeah, I'm really not an expert here. I would imagine anyone that has a certain level of health is eligible to donate. As far as how old you could be up in life, I know that I had several family members in excess of 80 years old want to be tested. I can share more of my story later as to why that might have been necessary, but I know both of my sons wanted to be tested to be considered to be living donors. Of course, they were in their early 20s, but I think my real feelings about how young you could be would be really more just personal feelings. And I don't know, I wouldn't want to press those on anyone else, but I think there's some kids are younger and really dialed into the world and really dialed into family members. And I think if, with all the information, I don't know that I would want to stop anyone from becoming a donor, but
okay.
If it were my kids and they were younger, I would have a serious talk with them about it. I know my own liver surgeon. Both boys wanted to be tested to be liver donors and give that part of their liver to me. And my liver surgeon tried to talk both of them out of it because of their age. So
okay.
No.
Good.
Well,
go ahead, Dr. Riyad.
For the policymaker, they always put ages.
Sure.
Of course, 18 is the adulthood start, so they consider anybody who is over 18 is eligible. This is for the living. I'm talking about the living. For the old age, also they put usually 60, 65, or 70, but it is always, we call it a relative contraindication or relative selective criteria, because we may find somebody who is 70 years, 75 years, but he is very fit. He is not hypertensive, he is not diabetic, so why not? Therefore, the upper age limit, there is no upper age limit. It depends on the condition of the patient, on the donor. For the deceased donor, we accept registration in the donor registry from anybody, regardless. We do not accept below 18 because this is the legal criteria. But when we have a brain dead child, we ask the family because they are the guardian of that body. Or the time that you decide to take this as a brain death, as a donor or not, is at the time of the death. You assess the deceased donor, and you see he is good, he is not good. Probably will take the kidney, but will not take the liver, or the vice versa. It depends on, does he have a working, a good functioning kidney? Does he have a good liver? Does he have a good heart? It depends on the cause of death, and it depends on his clinical condition. So it is all vague. It is relative. It depends on the condition of the patient.
Okay, Ashna, tell us, what does it mean? So when someone signs up to be a donor, what does it mean?
So there is a process in United States. I can't speak of other countries. We have a very robust process of how someone can be a part of organ donation. There is a way of going on and registering yourself if you're 18 and older, and you can, once you get your driver's license, you can go to DMV office and they do ask you. That is another way. Until internet came about in last few years, before that was a DMV was the main source of people being called out to be an organ donor. But that's one thing. It's like we have a very robust process of who can be and how they can do. But I think there are significant challenges is to addressing the myths around organ donation, and I think that is a barrier that we need to break in and talk to people as to we have a good process. You should be interested in being an organ donor, but addressing the concerns that they have as to it's not going to kill you, or it's not going to impact the quality of the life that you have as a living donor. So I think these are some of the myths you definitely want to address to with the people to consider them to be registering for organ donation.
Okay, sounds good. So Dr. Bala, is it different in India? Or is it the same? Because here usually people go to driver's license renewal, and the question is asked, do you want to be an organ donor? The person says yes or no. And I believe there are registries online that people can express their interest. How does it work in India, though?
You're on mute.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Dr. Bala.
Oh, sorry.
Unmute, please.
Okay. So it is almost like similar to US. In fact, nowadays, some of the states, they are just registering for the organ donation when they are doing a driving license. Most of the time, the deceased donors in India right now, what is happening is it is only after getting the family consent. I think if the government drives, especially the government of India drives, that whenever you issue a driving license or Aadhaar card or some of the government things, forms or things, so they can do the organ registration that time itself. That will give us a huge potential because India is a populous country. So probably we'll get a good number of organ donations.
Okay. Rashna, you've raised your hand.
Yeah, I was just gonna circle back to what Dr. Bala said. In US, currently we have what you call an opt-out policy, which technically, it's just saying that you're not automatically enrolled in organ donation, right? You have to say that you want to be an organ donor. And in other countries, I know that they have an opt-in policy. I think I'm using the right words here. So I think that has helped a lot in many other countries to get people to volunteer to be an organ donor. I know that there are certain concerns here in the United States to implement that policy. And I think that's another discussion we need to have is the policies needs to be addressed and changes needs to be made to increase the number of donors that we could have.
Okay, sounds good. And we'll come to that discussion as well. Dr. Cherian, please go ahead.
I was just going to talk about opt-in and opt-out that Rachana talked about. I mean, Spain was the lead for this protocol, where they made a rule that unless you have opted out, you are automatically considered a donor. And that increased the organ donation rates in their country. But in practice, what we found in the UK was that ultimately it rests on the family member next to the point of death. And therefore, you could opt in and opt out, but if it is a daughter or a son or a wife who feels uncomfortable with the process, then it really isn't the right thing to carry on. And therefore, I think programs like this that increase awareness of how much of a difference it can make to this huge 117,000 people just in the US of A, is the key, I think, to greater organ donation rates.
Okay, sounds good. So go ahead, Bob.
One of the things we haven't touched on too much is the folks who say, "Well, I've been sick in one form or another. I know they wouldn't want my organs." I was approached one day by a gentleman who had a registration booth at a huge health fair, and he was very nervous, tense. He presented himself shaking, and he said, "I want to donate, but I can't." And we chatted for a good while. And finally, I got to the point where I could say, "What is your illness that prevents you from donating?" And he says, "Do you have a paper and pencil?" And I reached over and gave it to him. And he reached down and he wrote out HIV. And I walked around the table and hugged him. And I said, "I've got good news for you today. We now do transplants for HIV patients. You can donate your organs if something happens to you and save another life." And the man broke into tears. There are many people who think because they had cancer many years ago, or they don't have, they're on heart medication, and they say, therefore, nobody would want to touch me. They forget all the other organs they have. They forget they have eyes. There's a lot of slippage there that those of us like Emil and I, who are talking to these people regularly, we can help them overcome those things. And it's difficult to do through the broad media.
Definitely. Thank you, Bob. Anil, I did see your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to address two of these discussions that you started with Dr. Bala about India. I do drive around a lot of countries and I try to familiarize myself with the laws, and that I say is the legal pillar of why organ donation is going to stand on and has to. In India, we've adopted this driver's license process, but unlike America, India has not supported it with the laws as America has. And I mean, one size cannot fit all. The law of India states very clearly that the next of kin has the right to decide. So when my father passed away, whether he wanted to or not, the decision was my brother, myself, and my mother, the surviving next of kin. So putting it on the license is pointless unless there is a conversation that's had at home. And in fact, that conversation, even in America. Now, Rachna talked about the fact that, you know, we'd get drives to sign up with the DMV and all of that. But I am currently talking and doing talks in America. I've been on the road since June, okay, and I've talked to thousands of people so far, face to face. As Bob said, we have to engage with people. It's not going to happen through media. And I asked them one question. Okay, you've signed up on your license. What happens next? Nobody knows the process. They think it's magic. It's just going to happen. Every state is set up differently, even with the OPOs. Who's telling the OPOs? Who's looking at a license? Chances are only when you're in a crash. So it's important to have that conversation with your family, regardless of which country you are. I'm bringing this down to being human and communicative with each other. There's another issue, as Rachna talked about, and I'm sure Dr. Riyadh will also endorse. And I find this in India. I've driven around India 3 times and spoken to many people in all facets of life, a villager to a small towner to a big city to a PhD, and I find more generosity in the smallest of villages. But the thing I'm talking about here is the Muslim community in India have found a way to say no because they believe that the Muslim religion forbids that. While at the transplant games, Iran and Saudi Arabia had large teams sent over there to compete. Now, if these are the custodians of the Muslim faith and they believe it's okay, then why in India do we have this barrier? So the information on organ donation is less medical but more trying to improve the blockages and creating a stent in the mind to open up that blockage of why I'm okay to donate. The same thing with age. This thing about age. Now, I think as human beings, our job in the social side of things is to say, yes, I want to donate and be able to be useful to somebody. These excuses, I'm too old, I've had a sickness, I wear glasses. Now, all of these are excuses that are generated by fear of the unknown. But if all they want to do is donate, let the medical side decide what is good for you and what is good to be taken and what's not to be taken.
Great point. Thank you. Great point. Thank you, Anand. I am coming to the religious question a little later. So very good. I want to understand like what is that one belief. So you talked about the importance of talking to families as well. So Brian and Riyad, please go ahead.
Well, I agree with Anit that the legislation is the most important thing that you have to start with, and the regulation issuing. We have tried it. We have tried the difficult way. You know, we have seen reached to our conclusion the difficult way. We tried and failed. Tried and failed. We tried the driving licensing, and it didn't work because, as Aniel said, there is no follow-up. When the law comes and it has regulated how the information should be passed to the people, how the will should be signed with two countersigns and should be physical, then we arranged our campaign according to this. We started with spreading people to face all the nation face to face in the booth in the shopping malls. We have 34 booths in shopping malls. There are nurses, doctors,
Wow.
working hour. They go there, they meet the people, they talk in the same language, same religion, and they show them programs in 6 languages. This is about organ donation, how to take health of your care. What is available in the country? If you have a renal failure, where to go? We have to build the trust.
Yes.
If the community doesn't feel full of trust and feel involved and feel served with safety, then they will not register. And even if they register, the family will say no. So what we managed to do is to gain the trust of the people, because all the facility is easy access, is free from A to Z. Dialysis, transplantation, and donation is for free. If you are from India and you are living in Qatar, then you have the right to bring your brother or sister from India on our expense to donate for you. So it doesn't start with just bring your organs, we want your organs. It has to start from how we take of your care, how to care for you. When he see himself near the Qatari sharing the same organs, the two kidneys from the same Nepali patient or Iraqi patient, this is it. To start with, we used to have resistance to when we stop them and we want to talk about disease donation. Now, with the COVID, we have made it after shields, and the people start to come by themselves to the booth and register as a donor. And when they register in a will with 2 signatures, and we keep it electronically in our donor registry. Nobody knows about it unless we are informed that this name is in the intensive care unit. He is a brain death. Is he a donor or not? After being announced dead, then we announce he is a donor. We do not announce that he is a donor prior to that, because we want to, because there is always a notion that probably if you know I am a donor, you will make me die sooner than you will not try to save me. This is the feeling. This is what, from experience. By the way, I have been, you mentioned 2004, I joined in Hamad, but I worked in this field from 77. Wow. I don't know my age. So this is, in time, we have gained this experience that you have to gain the trust of these people.
Very
And
well said.
this is it. Now when the question of that, exactly what the colleague has mentioned, that yes, he is a registered donor, but the family refused. In our law, we don't have to ask the family, but I don't take organs from a family that is bereaved and they say no. But when they see a will with his signature and his ID and two witnesses, they consider it as a will. And by all religion and faith, they respect the will. So what I get is 75% a yes from the family. While ordinarily, when he is not a donor registry, when I ask the family, come and donate your son, they will give me only 22%. So the donor registry was useful for me to raise the donation rate from 22 to 75. And this is how we increase our number of organ donation and organ transplantation.
Very well said, Dr. Riyad. Very well said. I think trust is the foundation of anything to succeed in business and family life, anything. So trust. So I think comes back to the trust. Brian, we would like to hear from you as well, please.
I just wanted to chime in with, and forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, but Anil. So I'm one of probably thousands of ambassadors for the United Network for Organ Sharing. And what I do with that, it's a volunteer thing, but I go speak to groups about becoming organ donors. But one of the things that we do talk about, Anil, is the heart on the driver's license is great, but it's really more of a conversation starter. So you have to tell your family. You have to tell whoever the closest person is to you. But that's one of the big things we do is sharing that. And to Riyad's point as well, even in the Christian, I mean, I'm a Christian, but there are groups of Christians who think it's non-biblical to impact the body. So I can't, I'm going to be resurrected in this new body. I can't give away part of what I have. So, and I have clients from my investment side. I used to do, discussions with them to do organ donation drives or just donor drives. And that's something I used to hear, and it would surprise me because it would open up discussions. But I think so much of it, these discussions where you tell people what has to happen, is all part of building trust also.
Definitely.
It's definitely interesting. We even have questions going back to, again, what Riyad was talking about with it's free for certain people. An issue comes up, well, I don't know if my insurance will pay for me to donate a kidney. Well, you don't have to worry about it. It's the receiver's insurance company takes care of it all. And anyhow, I just wanted to throw that in. It's just confirmation. Definitely. And I try to be boots on the ground with getting information out to groups. And one of the groups that I get a chance to speak to are kids going through their driver's license courses in high school. And it's really interesting. It's very open discussion. It's, a real living story of somebody that depended on it, and then just talk about the process. And almost always they come up and go, how can I register? And I'm like, well, first go have a conversation with your parents and talk to them about it, because I'm not trying to get them to do it. I'm just trying to get them to go have that conversation with their family. So
very well said. Before I go to Dr. Cherian, Bob, go ahead, please.
Just wanted to comment on a number of the comments that have been made here about driver's licenses. Arizona has quite a high voluntary registration. 95 to 96% of those are done through the Department of Motor Vehicles when people get their license. The other thing I wanted to mention is that about 5 or 6 years ago, we had an incident where a lady died, was a registered donor. Her organs were transferred. The family aggressively objected, aggressively to the point that security guards had to be brought in to protect the properties. Case went to court, and the courts found in favor of that person being a donor. As it turned out, she had actually signed registration 3 different times in her life. So in this country, they've made, they define the law and they adhere to it. which I was happy to see, and particularly proud that it was the state of Arizona that was able to enforce that.
Very well said. Thank you, Bob, for that real-time incidents as well. So, Dr. Cherian, my next question to you is, let's talk about the optimal preservation times for these organs, right? So, can you quickly tell us what are the normal preservation times? Because what I've seen, I'm not into that field. What I see is in movies, yeah. And specifically in one movie, I remember how they had to transport the organ from one city in North Delhi to Chennai or Bombay in 4 hours, and these two families struggling through that, and they had to get that heart. I believe it was a heart. But if you can just tell us what are those optimal preservation times for these organs to be transported? Can you hear us?
So can you hear us?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So organs are different, and the two organs with the shortest, what we call cold ischemia time, that is the amount of time that they can be safely preserved in ice, is 4 hours for the thoracic organs, which is the heart and the lungs. Followed by the liver, which allows you about 8, maybe 10 hours if beautifully preserved at the optimum temperature, which is about 4 degrees centigrade. And then I think the kidneys will tolerate cold ischemia times of up to even 14 and maybe even 18 hours. I think Dr. Riyad can correct me if I'm more or less in the right ballpark. So these are the figures, and in my view, there is a lot of things that need to happen in these hours, and this is one of the biggest problems if you have large countries like the US and India, especially in India, where the transport networks are not as beautifully managed as in a developed country, and therefore, from implantation point of view, from the patient getting ready to the anesthetic teams, to the surgical teams, to the hospitals, all of these things need to come into that space of time.
So actually it is making an impact, the goal is achieved. Okay, sounds good. So I think Dr. Cherian, okay, go ahead.
America has different time statistics.
Okay.
So it's all about how quickly and how easily you get to preserve in the process of that preservation. The OPOs are better set up in America. So I believe, and I've spoken to some of them in San Ramon, and they said it's even up to 20 hours in the post-death situation where your tissues are preserved. While in India, it's within 6 hours. So it's all about how quickly and how well you preserve. And climatic conditions have to play a part because India's climate is different. Decaying happens quicker. So all of these vary the times based on the region and zones you're in.
So as Anil, you said, it is all about preservation of the cold chain. So when you're moving from the ambulance to the plane, if there is going to be a time on the tarmac where the ice is already melted, these are the worries.
Yes.
And therefore, in the UK, I remember having flown from London to Crete and retrieved an organ and brought it back and implanted at 17 or 18 hours, which is sort of a really worrying time for the liver. But I would never do that in India because I don't have the confidence that it was perfectly at that temperature during that entire course of journey.
Very well said. I'm going to go to Bob and then Rashna, I'm coming to you along with another question as well. But that's why I asked you and most of you the optimal preservation times. I'm sure there's always we can go plus or minus, but what would be the optimal preservation times, right? Okay, go ahead, Bob.
Thank you. About a year and a half ago, St. Joseph's Hospital here in Phoenix called a lecture presentation to a group that I participate with. And the name of the presentation was Lung in a Box. And if you don't think that didn't draw a crowd. And what had happened is work had been done in Canada which was brought into the Dignity Health programs. St. Joseph's is a major lung transplant center here in the US. And they literally gather that lung, put it in a box, and process it with blood and keep it alive. And I believe it lasts as much as 2 days. And during that time, they have an excellent opportunity to truly test the various capacities that are critical as to whether this heart will work and who will work with best. I don't know what's evolved over the last 18 months or so, but it was a remarkable presentation.
Okay, sounds great. So Rashna, I know you have a comment to make from the previous question, but along with that, if you can also answer why should one consider organ donation, please?
Why should one consider organ donation? Obviously, we all know that there is a long list of people. In United States currently, if you look at the statistics, every 9 minutes a person gets on the waiting list. I have a personal experience. My mom got a kidney transplant just last year in May. So I have kind of been a little familiar with the process of of getting people to get on the list and waiting. My mom was diagnosed way back in 2002 with the kidney disease, but her kidney was not at the level where she could be on dialysis. So in 8 years, gradually her kidney started declining. So 8 years or 2010 or something is when she was actually on dialysis. And in United States, that's when the clock starts for you to be on the waiting list. So prior to that, even though you are a patient, ultimately you will need a kidney transplant, you can't really get on the waiting list. So we went through all of that process of, getting on the transplant list and, waiting. So 2010, since then she had been on dialysis, and just last year, exactly 2020, 10 years, she got it. So in United States, the process of getting a kidney is different from state to state based on the waiting list that you're on. And so we touched on a lot of topics here, but one of the things I do know that my mom we got her to register in different states to see, wherever it's quicker for her to get a kidney. But it's not that easy because like we have to look at where the relatives are so we could get that emotional support or whatever we need. And we looked at getting herself registered in California. Now with California, the rules are like it's so far away from Georgia, so 5 hours. The logistics didn't work out for us to register her there because she had to get to the hospital within 2 hours or so, and they could call you anytime. So you have to make sure you have that phone number and contact list updated and trying to make sure that whenever they call, you're available. And it's just making sure you pick up that bag and leave. So you don't have much time to think about, what you're going to do or figure out. All of that should have been taken care of ahead of time. And like I said, I'm just speaking from the recipient perspective, a person who wanted a kidney, and got it last year. So I'm familiar with all of these processes, and I know there's a lot that goes into place. Like Dr. Cherian said, keeping an organ for a while, and it depends on what organ it is and getting it. So there's a lot that takes place here.
Okay, sounds good. Dr. Bala, I did see your hand raised, please.
Yeah, see, as Cherian told, every organ has got the time limitation. The heart is the least one because the heart you have to do it within 5 hours. That's called the cold ischemic time, where you do the cross clamping in the donor and you are releasing the cross clamp in the recipient. So within these 5 hours, you have to be very quick enough, and you have to coordinate in a manner there will not be any time delay. The recently, like a year back, we did one heart transplantation from Delhi to Chennai. So imagine from the hospital, the donor hospital, the harvesting time you have to harvesting and the packing time you have to calculate. It will almost 15 minutes it will be. And then from the hospital, donor hospital to the airport, you have to calculate the time. And then the waiting time and the documentation time at the airport. Again, flying time from the Delhi airport to Chennai airport. And then from Chennai airport, you have to come out of the airport, it will take at least 10 minutes. But even though they gave a green channel for the heart, still there is a lot more things are there in this. So you have to quick enough to do within 3 hours, all these things. The flying hour time from Delhi to Chennai itself is almost 2.5 to 3 hours.
Correct.
So once the organ reach here, you have to quick, like your stitches to be, like we have to anastomose almost a 5 the anastomosis, we have to do it. So you have to do very quick, and then you have to release it. For as the lung, it will be almost 7 hours. The liver, you have almost 9 to 11 hours, and then kidney, you have 14 to 18 hours. So it all depends upon the logistic support, what you have, and the support from the donor hospital as well as the recipient hospital. So that matters a lot.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you for running through the step by step. I do have next question is for Dr. Riyad, but Anil, I did see your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm sorry, this may not go over very well, but I apologize with the most respect. I talk about organ donation. See, for an actual donor or a donor family, I don't think they care too much about the medical process. That's not, they don't really think about that. That's not never their objection. It is more about how they're going to feel, how the diseased body is going to be treated, and that's it. So over technicalizing any organ donation program is just going to be, wasteful.
Got it.
I'm speaking, now even a recipient, when a recipient goes out and tells somebody about how great it's been for them, and we have some here, and they understand that, there is still this other fear. I mean, yes, if I'm going to be asked to give a liver or a kidney while I'm still alive, well, it's great that you're going to benefit. But the major objection is, what's going to happen to me? Am I going to be okay? Answer me that question. So the whole process, and when I was asked to give a kidney, and by the way, I am a kidney donor, and I speak what I speak from a donor's perspective on the trials and tribulations of my mental state at that time. I couldn't find enough information to give me the confidence that I will be okay. When I searched for donor stories online, I found very few. In fact, I found none. Makes me believe that why? Creates more fear. And fear comes from unanswered questions. So if any organ donation drive has to succeed, please get us to represent not just the living donors, there's plenty in the world, to tell their experiences, show people how they live today. Has their life changed in any way? That will inspire confidence. Because a recipient will hang on to a straw if it gives them hope. But a donor needs a lot more than that.
Definitely. And the reason we have you and diverse perspectives on the call today is definitely for the audience and us to learn as well, the other multitude of perspectives. Dr. Riyad, we love your smile, so keep smiling. And Dr. Riyad, can you tell us, can an organ donor be a tissue donor as well? And if, just goes back to the word trust, if someone is brain dead, is it possible for him or her to recover?
To recover. Okay, for the tissue donor, the same organ donor is a tissue donor. Usually, in all the forms that is asking people to register on the donor registry, there is a choice. I donate all my organs and tissues for transplantation, for science, or for research. It depends. Some people may say, I don't want to for research or science, but I want to donate for transplant to save life. And I want to give only my kidney, only my liver, all the tissues. Or we put the usual thing in our practice. Some people say, I want to give only my cornea. So we have made a choice, an option of cornea only, kidney only, all the organs. This is the commonest. Cornea only, all the organs are the second common, kidneys only, and then selective. They put liver, they put pancreas. Tissues, once they accept the organ, they usually accept the tissue. So usually the organs have the tissues with it, but the use of the tissues is not with all the deceased donor. Probably he has signed for everything, but we don't need the skin. We don't need the bone. We do not need, this is the point, that it depends on what you have agreed with the donor registry. And the same paper will go to the family of non-registrant. The family of a deceased donor, would you donate his organs? Yes. Which organ? All. They go through the choices on the same form. So this is what our law says, and has to be attested by two. One is related to the family, one is from our side, from the medical side, and then we go by it. All right? The donor, when the family or the registered donor has chosen all his organ, we will choose only the useful, because if he said only for transplant, we will take only the organs that are useful for our patient. If not, then we will go, if all of them, we will take all of them. We have now the kidney, the liver, the pancreas, the lung, and hopefully in future, the heart. We are working on the heart as soon as we can. So we take only the organs that we will use. We will not take all the use. We used to have organ sharing with Saudi Arabia, but because of technical and political issues, this has been stopped for some time. Now we are reviving this mode, and we are activating our lung heart transplant. So this is the answer for the first question. Second question is about, you said?
Brain dead. If someone has been declared brain dead, is it possible for him or her to recover?
No, there is no such incidence in the world. No such incidence in the world. They claim some stories, media here and there, but there is, as far as I know, and I have reviewed this so much because I have been asked for this by, who? Not the people who, not the scientific people, not the people from our medical, it's from the people, and mostly from the religious clerks, these scholars. When we started to put the religious, the Islam religious opinion on organ donation, when I ask them for a fatwa in favor of organ donation, this is usually the question. And we want to look for an answer for this question, and I can assure you there was no a single incident where the brain death patient, a properly diagnosed brain death patient has recovered.
Okay. So again, it brings back to the trust that you're trying to establish to show statistics that, hey, he's a perfect, or he or she's a perfect person to donate.
Yes.
Okay,
definitely.
sounds great. So Brian, go ahead.
By the way, the brain death, when you sign a death certificate, you have to decide on when it's the moment of death. What is the exact time of death? And according to our law, brain death, when it is confirmed by two committees that have 4 doctors, one is a neurologist, one is a neurosurgeon, one is an intensivist, one is a physician, attending physician. The 4 people have to sign as a brain confirmation. That time, the second test confirmation is the time of death. So when I show the family, I show them, they see the beating heart. But when I show them the certificate. He is dead and he is alive. He is with a beating heart because of the ventilator, because of the drugs that we are giving him. Once we unplug, everything ends. No beat in the heart. So this has helped us to reach out again, and they are accepting this more than before because of this. It's very important that the death certificate starts.
Very well. So Brian, I'm coming to you, but if this is direct comment from the question right now, Dr. Cherian, please go ahead and follow. And I didn't know if Anil had raised his hand, but Dr. Cherian, please go ahead.
Sorry, did you say Anil first? Because he did raise his hand first. Anil, please.
No, go ahead, Doc.
I'm not sure it's a direct question, but I wanted to raise, because this is a very good forum for something like this, and I really liked what Anil said. It's all about the donors. The internal people know everything there is to know about organ donation. So I want to say three things. The first is, if you go to the internet and if you know anything about healthcare, you will find that there are a minuscule percentage of the good stories and a vast majority of the bad stories. And that causes what we call a publication bias. Therefore, if somebody who doesn't know anything about it, like Anil said he was at that time, goes into the net, he is more likely to find 10 negative stories, and if he is lucky, two good stories, because people are motivated to write only when they've had something that has emotionally affected them strongly. So that's the first point. And we as a community, I believe, and South Asian Liver Institute, the company I run, is trying to make a difference to that on digital media, trying to create positive stories, at least to balance out the negative stories out there. That's point number one. 2 points from a medical fraternity point of view that I want all the public to know is that with brain death donation, there are the vast majority of brain death donations happen from the wards and the care of neurosurgeons and neurologists. And I want everybody who's non medical to understand that if, for example, somebody comes in with brain injury, and they've had a brain operation to try and resolve, because the point is to save their lives first, and then they go on and become brainstem dead, even though we all know that that neurosurgeon has done his best, some of these injuries are so aggressive and so severe that nobody can survive that, and they become brainstem dead. But we as a community need to understand that from a neurosurgical point of view, they would consider that a failure of their treatment. And almost it is like a slight embarrassment that they've had to let down a patient to becoming a brainstem donor. This is just a fact I just want to throw out there. And then I believe, Anil, we can talk about this at a later time. I believe, especially in communities and countries where there is private medicine, like India and even the US of A to a certain extent, not so much in Europe, which is publicly funded, there is a misconception or a conception among the donor public or the donor pool or the general public that this is a whole lot of people who are running corporate hospitals with a lot of profit margins, and why should I contribute to this? So, whilst there is an element of truth in that, and I believe that we shouldn't shy away from that, I believe it is our duty to tell everybody that we can. Whilst there is finances involved, there is almost nothing in the world where finances is not involved in. There is a lot of good that comes out of it. And the more the good that comes out of it and that is publicized. And Anil, you are in a beautiful position to do that. Brian, I think you're doing a fabulous job from what Nazeera is telling me. And Bob, I cannot believe that you would do anything less. And therefore, I think these are 3 points that I want to highlight to you guys who are really holding the flame high for us back in the hospital.
Very well said. So, Anil, a quick 20 seconds, and then I do want to go to the question with Brian,
Yeah,
please.
so just personally, I'm a proponent of donations and trade. Okay, if it's done fairly. Now, the most common question that I've been asked, and I counsel people every day, is I want to commit suicide. I had one yesterday, by the way, and I'd like to sell my kidney. If people are saying that if I sell my kidney, I'm still going to live well in one kidney, with one kidney. But if I am able to sell my kidney and get some money out of this so I can save my family or my own life from depression, because everybody else in the system is profiting from it. Everybody else. Well, the recipient is getting something out of it, for sure, life. The doctors are making money. The drug companies are making money. The hospitals are making money. Then why this moral high ground of I, as an adult, healthy in my correct thinking, I'm volunteering to sell my kidney. The problem is that there's a middleman that's profiting from this unscrupulously. If that can be done and fixed and corrected, then why is that not an option? I can be a donor, I can be a seller. And this is my personal view, but there are laws of the land that one has to go with, and that's what you go with. But
Okay.
these are questions to be asked of society in general, and perhaps somewhere we'll find the middle ground.
Sure. Dr. Sherian, just 10 seconds, and then I have to go to Brian. We have to move to the next topic.
Nazeera, this is a very important point. What
Yes.
Anil just said, should we bringing trade into it? I've been in organ transplantation in 2 different countries, 2 different continents for 20 years. And I strongly believe that we should never, I would fight tooth and nail, never to let finances come into it. I'll tell you why. Because in the States, you may be thinking there is nobody who can force somebody else to. But I tell you, in 70 out of the 198 countries in the world, there are people who can force other people to do that if they wanted to. Power and money comes into the game, and then there is abuse. And there is no way you'll be able to provide support or protection from that.
Definitely. And I was going to come to it as well, along with organ trafficking. That's also a topic for our discussion, and the scams that go on and why there's a lack of trust in the community. But Dr. Riyad, please keep those thoughts. Brian, you said there's something happened in March of 2018, or maybe a major health event in 2018. Can you briefly tell us what, please?
Sure. That's when I got diagnosed. I probably, like a lot of men, and so all the surgeons on here will yep, we've heard that before. Felt some discomfort in my midsection for several months before I finally went to the doctor. I thought that I was just overworking or stressed or working out too much or a lot of other things, and especially in the area of the States, maybe it's not just here, but if 2 Advil would get rid of the pain for a couple of hours, then you take those and you just go on about your business. And but September 17th, 2 days before that, Saturday, September 15th, 2018, I called my wife, who was on a trip in New Orleans, and told her that I made a doctor's appointment with my doctor for the following Monday morning to go see what was wrong. And she hopped on a plane and came home. So she was like, yeah, you never volunteer to go to the doctor on your own. So that morning, I throughout the day, after several tests, I was admitted to the hospital and diagnosed with end-stage liver and kidney failure. And for Dr. Cherian, my MELD score that day was a 27.
Wow.
So I was pretty sick that day. I was given later on that night a pretty dire outlook on how sick I was. I was at stage 5 kidney failure and stage 4 liver failure. And my, as if that wasn't enough, my pancreas had started leaking. I had an autoimmune issue that I wasn't aware of and just ignored it. It was noticeable pain, and I just ignored it. So that doesn't make me smart. It makes me very hard-headed and not smart. I had a very rough 65 days, but I want to compliment all of the surgeons on here. My liver transplant took place on Thanksgiving morning, 2018. And one of the things that I was so grateful for, and I was telling the surgeons, and I wanted to get it out, and they kept stopping me saying, no, this is what we do. I felt like I was taking them away from their families on this holiday, and they were coming in to do this for me. and it was overwhelming for me. The other part that was overwhelming for me was that knowing that my only solution was transplant, having that in the back of my mind that somebody's got to die for this to happen, and having a tough time dealing with that the whole way through. So actually now pushing for folks to become organ donors is sort of driven. There was this selfless person that decided to sign up as an organ donor, and a family or someone who okayed it, and the transportation issue really surprised me too. The organs came from Memphis, Tennessee to Charlotte, North Carolina, which is Carolina Medical Center is where I had my transplant. And that was when I learned about the transport times as well, guys. So it was, as you get on your phone and start seeing, well, how long do they have to get here? So, but that was the 65-day period between diagnosis and transplant receipt was extremely active, to put it lightly. A lot of things happened that were not good during that process. I had a couple of significant bleeding situations. I was in a coma for about a week at one point, and a lot of different hospital stays. A very expensive plane ride from Richmond to Charlotte one night, trying to get me to stop bleeding to get to the transport center. So it all gave me a completely different perspective. Really, I want to stop talking now because I'm so dialed in. I've taken 7 pages of notes in my book with you guys talking. So it's
So Brian, what was one major life-changing behavior or attitude you felt happened after the transplant, or a decision that you made?
literally wake up every day and say thank you and start my day off that way. It's just something that I do. It's a part of every day. So I think I've always been a thankful person and a giving person. The amount of giving that was done to myself and my family during that time was overwhelming. Story I like to tell people is I'm one of those guys where if I think you're not feeling well and you're a neighbor, I'll slip out back when I think you're sleeping and rake your yard. It's not because I want people to know that I've done it. I just don't want you to have to worry about it. I got a picture on a Saturday after my transplant, and there were 38 people in my backyard cleaning my backyard up. That was pretty overwhelming to me. But it's one of the things where you get to experience the best in people. I'm
already becoming emotional. But Brian, do you know who your donor family is?
I do not. The original letter that we sent hasn't been answered yet, and I hold out hope that one day we will meet. But I'm just following the rules right now of the transplant team.
Okay.
So, and actually for us, we became friends with our transplant teams, so we still stay in touch with the doctors. I don't go to Charlotte for regular checkups now. I go back here to the original doctors that met with me in Richmond. But I can sometimes get a call and go, it's just, hey, Andrew, and it's Dr. Andrew DeLamos who was the hematologist on the team, just calling to check on me and say, hey. So it's as a recipient, a patient, like the gratitude to the transplant teams, let alone the donor. Obviously, the donor is at the top of the list of gratitude, but all the different transplant teams. It's hard not to be grateful for that, and I think just an air of gratitude is something that's probably a bigger part of every day. So.
And Brian, I believe you also moved from your professional career into the nonprofit world of connecting people for a cause. That's a great.
See, my focus in life is connecting good people to other good people for good causes. So.
Awesome, great. Seems like we both have the same goal then. So, Dr. Riyad, I know you had something to say, and then I want to go to Bob and then Rashna for sure. And then Bala, please. I'm coming in that order. Go ahead, Riyad. Dr. Riyad.
It's about what Anil has said about this man who gave a choice of selling his kidney or committing suicide. Well, I think don't want to talk about Cinderella word and talk about, but it should be the responsibility of the government.
Yes.
It is not about organ donation. We are not doing organ donation only. We are helping the poor. We are helping the jobless. We are taking care of the sick people. We are taking care of the poor people. So it is a duty of the community, duty of the government to prevent and to see what is wrong with this man. It is in our law, selling organ is a 10-year imprisonment and 1 million real fine. So it is. This is from the old law. Is 1986. Let me finish, Anil.
No,
And
no, go ahead. I'm just letting you know
yes,
that I'd like to say something.
and but nowadays we have the ethical committee, of course. It has a donor advocate, it has a psychiatrist, it has a social worker, and it has a lawyer. When they sit and meet each individual of living donor, each prospective living donor, and when they discover such thing, somebody who is trying to sell his kidney, we don't send him to prison. We send him to the social department. See, what's wrong with this man? Please try to help him. It is they are not going to help him by giving money, but they see if he is kicked out from a job, they will look into the case. If he doesn't have money to return home, because most of the people are expatriate, if they don't have, if he wants help with his embassy, if he wants help with his landlord or company employer, and these sort of things. And we have gradually we see that the number of people coming to say, I want to sell the kidney, because now everybody knows that getting money for the kidney is the number of these people are getting less and less. Because I tell you, by the way, I am not from Qatar. I am from Iraq. I born in Iraq. I'm still carrying the Iraqi passport. So don't think I am making propaganda for Qatar. I am making the propaganda for these ethical standards and these humanitarian principles that should prevail. Not only about organ donation, about the way we treat our patient and the families and the community. So it is doing good for everybody. It is a community responsibility. It's not my responsibility or the team of the transplant or the hospital responsibility. It's the government. It's the society. It's all the system. I think we should work hard on such examples. And as Tom has said, that most of the countries in the world, cannot exclude anybody. They have some sort of money traded for kidneys. I won't say about other organs, but I have cases coming from USA, from UK, from Europe, from all over the world, who have traded their organs for money. So we hope that we will be able to control this trade, organ trade, and we have treat our people right, with equity, with good social care. Thank you so much.
And a quick feedback, comment, and then I want to go to Bob, please.
Yeah, and I think we're getting down to the dark side of this whole thing, and it is important to get there and shine a light in there so people are more aware. Okay, uh, I'm in the trenches, like some of you are, but my trenches are varied. They're varied from societies, from socioeconomic conditions, and mostly economic conditions. Now, when you go into India, with the number of people that are there, you spoke about equity, Dr. Riyad, and Qatar is a rich country with very few people. India is rich, but it's only with a few people, with a lot of people who don't have it. Okay, and when you're in this space, now organ donation is now becoming a privilege of the rich and those who have the money to afford it. A liver transplant in India costs no less than 23 lakhs. Of course, a kidney is a lot cheaper. But when you're talking about a person who earns $200 a month and needs a liver, now where is all this moral high ground coming from? Get down to the trenches and see what they're thinking. If the government doesn't step in, like you said, to subsidize the cost, and because if they find a viable donor in their family, and every family has a donor, all right, don't get me wrong, that is a fact. And the extended family, 100%. But I recently worked, so my foundation works, we're trying to get donors inspired. That's all I work on. I don't worry about the medical side. In fact, all my surgeons who work with me are now my colleagues. I take vetted cases to them, and they charitably are able to do a transplant for them at a much lower cost. And so that's how I work with my doctors today. My gratitude is with action. Okay, so 2 months ago, I'm just a quick story so I can illuminate what I'm trying to say. Not 2 months ago, in May, I was driving around India, and I happened to meet this driver who works for a rich family, is a driver in their home. I happened to have my car break down for something, so I was in a garage, and he happened to see my car, which is all plastered with organ donation. He came and talked to me. He said, I have a daughter who's 23, and I cannot find how to help her. She needs a liver. I said, what about your family? Isn't there a donor? So she had a donor problem. So he said, no, we don't, nobody wants to give one. So I said, can I speak to the family? Now, having been a donor myself, of course, not the liver, but a kidney, I was able to convince the mother, who stepped up and says, okay, I'll give my daughter a liver. Okay, now this is a small town in Gujarat. Now comes the cost of 23 lakhs. That was the bill. Then I reached out to my friend. I'm sure Dr. Cherry, you know him. And this is Dr. Sonal Asthana at Aster in Bangalore. Right? I reached out to Dr. Sonal Asthana, and he's a fellow Rotarian. I'm a Rotarian as well. And I asked him, I said, this is a problem. Can you help her? So he says, okay, if she can come to Bangalore, I can help her. And now Bangalore and Gujarat is a distance, not traveling. So essentially, we had to raise about 25 lakhs for her. So when there is no equity, not everyone can find an Anil or an Anil-like person to help this poor family. So a lot of lives are lost. And they had a viable donor in the family who was donating, not selling. And yet they couldn't get that benefit. So unless you want to talk about the entire system, and that's what I'd like to speak to Dr. Riyad about offline and get more into what they do there, because it seems like a great system. Then we need to find other alternatives. A moral standing is okay when you can afford it. As Eliza Doolittle's father in the movie My Fair Lady said, if morals govern, I can't afford it.
Definitely. Point well taken, Anil. Point well taken. And I think these are some things we should continue. Probably I would love to have a session too to discuss all the, the trenches, the dark side of all this. But the next question is for Bob. So there you got your answer, Brian. Bob, and then I'm coming to Dr. Bala, and then Rashna, please be ready for your question. Bob, how did life change? I know Brian mentioned from his perspective. How did your life change? Did you have how did you go through this entire emotional, I don't know if it's a chaos, or maybe you had all the answers, you had everything lined up. Is that the usual case for for organ donation process?
Thank you. Life speaking to you is in its 24th year, but I had 55 years prior on the job training. I was living the American dream. Had good health, loving family, beautiful home in an upper scale suburb of Los Angeles, and I had a thriving financial investment business. And one day my wife says, honey, you better exercise a little more. Your tummy's getting round. But you don't want to hear that, but the next day it was rounder, and the next day I went to the doctor. I had nothing to tell him. First thing I ever had was a cold, never been in a hospital. He ran tests. 2 days later, he says, your liver's in serious trouble, report to UCLA 6 a.m. I was one of the lucky ones. I got a liver transplant in 2 weeks. What I went through that first day was such a change of life, it's hard to describe. But I found myself in a bed with a parade of white jackets, at least 30, maybe 40, going through, poking and prodding with questions and fingers, trying to come up with answers. And at the end of that first day, the doctor came in and said, your liver's in total failure. We don't know why. There's no cure, there's no fix. What we'd like to do is try to get you a transplant. And that will take some time to see if you're qualified to get on the waiting list. Meantime, we'll try to keep you alive day to day. I'll be back in the morning. You may have questions. Questions. What's a liver? How big is it? Where is it? What does it do? And what are the chances of my getting back to work in a couple of weeks? I have my own business and I got to be there. Well, I didn't like many of the answers I got, and particularly I was stunned when I was told I'd go back to work in about 2 years. But as I mentioned, I was one of the lucky ones that got a transplant in 2 weeks. And typically you were told you could go home in another 2 weeks. Well, as a guy, I naturally figured, well, 14 days, I'll do it in 12, maybe 10. My 6th week in the hospital bed, I got a call from the staff telling me I might be able to go home that Friday. And on Wednesday, I got a phone call from my wife, and these were her exact words. Bob, I'm not going to pick you up Friday. I don't know what you're going to do. I can't take this anymore. Click. Now, to fully appreciate that, anybody who knew us, our circle of friends, relatives, whatever, our marriage was the envy of any crowd. It was a delightful relationship, yet this was happening. Many years later, as I progressed through my journey, I learned that the estimated divorce rate amongst major transplants was about 50%. And I have to admit that our marriage came within inches of that over the next many years, but we got through it. But I got home after that 6th week, and a month or two later, I found myself back in the hospital with a touch of malaria, 104 degrees temperature for a month. Survived that and realized when I got back home that we had lost everything. Lost our home, business, all of our assets. And maybe my biggest loss was the ability to do arithmetic. I had an MBA from a major university, and my life had been investment management and financing small business. And I couldn't do child's arithmetic. The next 2 years were spent failing at every job I could get. I tried to get answers from my physicians. They sympathized, but they certainly had no answers. I went to a group, and they met monthly. It was a support group for transplant patients and their spouses. And my wife and I went, and about 50 people there were warmly greeted, wonderfully treated for 2.5 hours. Delightful bunch of people. As we walked back to the car, I said, Marie, are you coming back? She said, no. I said, I understand. I didn't get anything either, but I'm going to come back a time or two to see what maybe I've missed. And I did return, and it was a wonderful coffee klatch. Cookies were good. People were delightful, but there were no answers. How do I fix my life? And I left the last time thinking, I'll be back. This is going to change. Well, life, after I got my job 2 years later, changed because things started to go my way, and I was making a 6-figure income again, and life was good. Socialize, go to the movies, have friends, go to dinner, and got to meet 2 new people that I would never met, my granddaughter Alexandra and my grandson Caden, who are both now on the dean's list at their respective universities. And life was good again until about 10 years later when that new liver started to fail. And I asked the doctor what the prognosis was, and he said, well, we don't have much experience on people who have lasted more than 10 years with a liver transplant. But we'll try to get you a new one, and we're going to try to get you a new kidney too, because that's pretty beat up from the medications you've been taking. And I told him I wasn't terribly interested in dragging my family through all of this again. I said, but you are offering 2 for 1. How about a liver and a facelift? He said, no, you're really going to want the kidney. We got to do that. And I soon found myself spending the next 3 months in the ICU. I'm 6'2". I was down to 104 pounds. And one day a psychologist came in and started to tell me he wanted to talk to me about the transplant that was going to be coming. And I couldn't physically throw him out, but I verbally did when he left the room. I told him I didn't want it. I went to sleep thinking maybe they finally got the message. Got to take care of, I can't drag my family through this. I woke up and there were 3 people in my room. My dear friend of 50 years, my son, and my wife. And my friend says he was a successful businessman and a young man. He'd been a professional athlete. So he gave me the locker room, rah, rah, come on, Bob, you did it before, you can do it again. You got the strength, you got the courage, we're here for you, let's go. And my son, who had just finished a 20-year professional athlete career, gave me the same message. Dad, I love you. Come on, man, let's go, let's get him. Whoop, whoop. I said, guys, you're really missing the point. We were terribly lucky last time. And it was a terribly traumatic situation. I dragged you all through. And I don't want to drag Marie through this again. And the one thing I did save out of all the losses that we had is I was able to hang on to $1 million, part of the life insurance that the banks required, $1 million life insurance. And I said, I can leave Marie with $1 million tax-free and no debt. She can live a decent life for the rest of her life. And that's what I'm going to do. And Marie had not spoken at that point, but it was her turn. And she looked me in the eye and she said, Bob, I don't want $1 million. I want you in any condition, under any circumstances. I was 65, broke, and unemployed. She was a little older. But I couldn't resist that. And we had the transplant. And in the process, I made a commitment that if I got through this, I was going to write the book that everybody had been pestering me to write. And I was going to become a life coach, which several people had been encouraging me to do. And when I got home, my wife and I spent 4 years together before cancer took her away. But we both agreed that those 4 years were probably the best years of our 40 years together. I went to life coach school, got trained. I also went to another group at UCLA. It was the liver transplant group. It was probably one of the oldest support groups in the world. At that time, UCLA was the mecca of transplant. The head surgeon there was doing record numbers. He did over 5,000 liver transplants before he retired. And the group I joined was 3 people. And we would have 3 or 4 people a week. And I said, this isn't right. And started to make some changes and basically came up with a process within groups. With a group, would not be talking about the puppy you just got or whether your nephew got the scholarship he was seeking. But it was education, consolation, and inspiration. And that was the theme and the gist of support groups. And the group of 3 became 8, became 20, became 30, became, sorry, fire department rules don't allow it. You can't be here today. And I was able to do that for about 3 years. And then my wife was stricken with cancer and I had to return home. When she passed, I moved to Phoenix and had to decide whether I would get a decent job or write a book. And I opted for the book. And it's been very well received. It's titled Tigers Under My Bed, Life Lessons Tamed During 3 Organ Transplants. And I got that out of listening to people, other patients. When UCLA had to build a new hospital across the street, those new rooms were single occupant only. I had lived a life of multiple occupants in my room. And the debate was, of course, is it better to have one person or should you have others? And I sat silently and I listened and realized that the voices that were really important were the ones that came to you at 2 a.m. And I called them the tigers under the bed. They haunt every transplant patient and every caregiver. The caregiver has it when he or she goes home. And at home, those tigers are there too.
Definitely.
And the tigers are death, fear, anger, and one that most people don't get, and that's loss of control. And those were points emphasized through our support groups, and that I continue to emphasize in discussions and support groups that I'm involved with here in Phoenix now.
Very well said.
I'm very active with Donate Life and also with Transplant Community Alliance, which provides cash services and also consulting work. And we're doing a couple of new things. There's a tremendous need for patients to get better coverage. Not so much just getting the policy issued, but getting it recognized. People think they have coverage, they do have coverage, and they get denied. And it's incredible what goes on. We've established a staff that handles that beautifully. We're now getting calls not only from Arizona, but all over the country to help save lives after the fact that they've gotten a transplant. And we've also had embryonic contact with a number of health providers in Phoenix because we have a population of 300,000 to 400,000 people, Native Americans. None of them live in a metro section. They're about 200 miles to 400 miles away from Phoenix, and their needs are tremendous. Their living environments, in some cases, are reflective of 19th century or early 20th century. It's unbelievable
Definitely.
what we can do there.
So, Bob, I'm going to definitely read the book. I think you have hit the nail on the head with what is that tiger under the bed. And I can sort of empathize with what goes on during the organ donation process. I think you put it entirely, the family issues, the self-control is lost, the fear of unknown, what is the next step. So as Brian went back to just being thankful every day, I get up and I'm thankful. I'm sure there's so much more emotional, aspect of this whole process as well. So thank you, Bob,
Thank you.
for bringing this testimonial out. Thank you. And so Dr. Bala, usually when we talk of heart, it's about love, it's about poetic, between, mostly man and a woman loving and family, creating a family together. Teenagers, the love is different in each phase of life. But when we talk about heart to you, it's a little bit scary. Can you tell us why you chose this field? And if there's something that in the field that you took about heart transplantation, surgeon, any story that stuck with you that keeps you going every day the next day?
Yeah. See, when I joined my general surgery, I wanted to become an orthopedic surgeon. Unfortunately, I could not get orthopedic surgery, so I chose to be a general surgeon. And then, over time, I wrote an entrance exam. I got a MCH cardiothoracic surgery. So I chose to become a cardiothoracic surgeon, and then I wanted to do differently from others. So I just went to a few countries to train as a transplant surgeon. So I have been to a few countries like Germany and then Austria, where even though the country is smaller, they have been doing a large number of transplants. And then that is the one which inspired me to do a transplant surgery in India. So regarding the heart, because we every day we do repair the heart as well as we replace the hearts. So we don't have any fear as such.
Wow.
When we take out the organ, we are giving a life to the other patient. That is how we consider. We take out the life from one person and giving the life to the other person. Similar to all other organs as well. And most of our transplant happens in a deceased donors. Unlike a liver and kidney, we always take out the organ from the deceased donors. So that is how the life goes on. And then the other things. And what other things you asked?
So, has any story of a particular patient or any testimonial that sticks to you throughout and sort of inspires you to get up every morning and do what you do? Anyone's story, any patient has come back and said, hey, look, I'm living now with a new heart. Do they and do they express a different attitude in their life? Because a heart is like, I mean, that's the muscle that never rests, right, in our whole body throughout the year, throughout our life. So I know kidney is important, liver is important, but somehow women are more connected to the heart.
See, yeah, exactly. See, every patient wants to know who has donated it. Now, as a legality, we never reveal the identity of the donors. So, like for example, there is a patient who had been really sick actually. He was admitted in some of the private hospital in some other centers, and he was managed medically. They could not able to revive him. Then they shifted here to our hospital. We have put him on ECMO support, temporary ECMO support. Then, fortunately, he got a call, and then we registered that patient. But within 24 hours, he got a call, and we are transplanted him. And he was all right within a week, 10 days time with the heart transplant. Then he said, "It is wonderful," and the suffering was so huge, like they could not able to go to his toilet before the transplant. Once we do the transplant, the life is really changed. And it's almost now 1.5 year over. He keeps coming and saying every year, like whenever the organ donation day is happening, he will send a bunch of roses to me and saying thanks for your the transplant work you have done, wonderful. Because of you, I am alive. That kind of things, which really motivates us to do more number of transplant as well. And similarly, the donor part. I'll tell you a small story. We went. There is a call from Madurai. That is down south. So we didn't get any flight. So I had to drive down to the donor hospital, almost 600 kilometers away from Chennai. The driver who came with me, he asked about the donation. I told him it will be a live donation or a disease donation, and that the family has to give the approval once the declaration done. The next day morning, we couldn't get the organ because the organ was not good, so we came back. On the second day, I saw him in the corridor of the one of the ICU. I asked him, "What are you doing here?" He said, "My son has met with an accident. The doctor saying that he's blinded, but I am intention to donate my son's organ." So the speech I gave him, the kind of information I gave him that night, it motivated him. And then, unfortunately, his son has met an accident, and he came forward to donate. So like that, you have to give some kind of information to the whole community, the good information to the community. I tell you, in India, there is no tradies involved. Most of the time, it is a trust which involves between the donors and the recipient. None of the private hospitals are earning with this kind of organ transplants, I'll tell you. Because the resources are huge, the amount spent is huge. And we are not doing only for the rich people. Almost 50% of the donation, the transplant happens for the poorer people in India as well. Because the government which supports, the government which pays for it.
Oh, good to know. Thank you so much. Definitely, people get inspired and take action steps, right? But Rashna, we are, no matter what, we're still a minority in this huge land. Of course, it's the land of opportunity. I love USA as well. Sometimes my heart is back in India. But Rashna, tell us how, as a minority, you went through for your family's donation process or transplantation process. What was it that you saw the obstacles and how can it be improved?
So, from being a minority perspective, honestly, I didn't think I was in a different space than the majority of the people here, and I don't think my race or my mom's gender or race or anything kind of separated her out, or our treatment was different from other people. So that was something very assuring during the whole process. So the obstacles was definitely understanding the whole process thoroughly, because there are so many moving parts to it, and you work with different teams during the whole process, right? So you have social workers, you work with transplant team, which is a whole different team comparison to the people who are taking care of the dialysis, the nephrologists. So there are multiple teams that you have to work with, and coordinating with different teams is definitely a little overwhelming during the process to make sure that everybody is on the same page and the evaluation is done thoroughly and we are meeting the timeline because at the end of the day, like I mentioned earlier, when the call for the kidney call comes in, everything should be done. So it's not as simple as just, you're a kidney patient, you're on the list and you get a call and you go. There are a lot of moving parts in terms of making sure all the tests, all the medical requirements, all the evaluations have been completed. And it has to be completed every year and the reports has to be discussed with your doctors. Especially if you have other health conditions. Like with my mom, kidney was the only one until like 2 years ago when she had an accident which kind of gave her a subdural hematoma, which she was bleeding internally from her head. So that affected a lot because the whole time we were waiting for a kidney call to come in, and then this happened, and that's why she got a call. So the timing was very critical, but at the time she wasn't qualified for the kidney because the transfusion she received during the treatment, which kind of eliminated her from the list at that point. But the process in United States is so much is so robust that I can't even imagine going anywhere else for a treatment. I don't know about India or I don't want to call for another country, but it's great. Like at that moment when she was not qualified, we were afraid that they would put her down the list and she would have to start the whole process again. But actually, 2 years down the road, she got a call again. So they had promised that they're not going to let this slip by. She's still going to be on that same list, and they will follow up with her. So as soon as her treatment within a year was done, transfusion, all of the process was over. She was qualified again. So I think the process was great. I don't think her gender, her race, her social economic status differentiated her treatment compared to others.
Very assuring to know. And thank you so much, Rachna, for that. Very, very, very assuring. So we are into that health equity in the transplantation process. So Anil, quick 10 seconds feedback, please. And then I want to ask Dr. Riyadh and then go to Dr. Sherian. Go ahead, Anil.
Yeah, on the issue of race, it's not so much on the treatment, but I think race plays a big part in the donor pool.
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to give a quick example. I know Dr. Cherian spoke about England a lot. I'm assuming you have experience over there. But when I was driving from Bangalore to Scotland doing my awareness campaign and I ended up in England, here is the alarming statistic that is not different in America either. 30% of people on the recipient list in the UK were Asians. In their parlance would be South Asians, Indian. And in the donor pool, Asians comprised of only 2%. We're ready to take, but not ready to give. And it includes the Asian community and the African American community. And the same problem exists here in the US. And it is about increasing awareness to increase the donor pool. See, as a recipient, as in the donation side, when a family donates of a brain death victim, it's an emotional decision. And when a living organ donor donates, it's either an emotional decision for that individual or it's a next level emotion for humanity. These are only 3 drivers of organ donation, nothing else, worldwide. And so if you have to look at 100,000, 117,000 people that you talked about now that are waiting for an organ in the US, of which 80%, 87% are kidney, waiting for a kidney. Are you trying to tell me that there is not enough love in the family for a family member to step up and say, okay, I'll give it to you? Or are you always waiting for someone to die? And I understand what Brian's feelings were, that someone had to die to give me this. But if we are able to increase the confidence, the awareness, and unblock mind blocks of people to step forward. I mean, I almost lost my marriage, Bob, as a donor. You're talking about as a recipient, right? But in India, the law is that my wife had to consent, failing which I cannot give a kidney even if I wanted to. So I was considering divorce. But the bottom line I'm trying to make here is, I think the focus needs to be with gaining confidence of uh, fighting the fear, because fear comes in the way of love. The fear of my own state as a donor. After donating, will I live the same life? Or we have the fear of our next life. And you alluded to that in the Christian faith as well, that you cannot tamper with your body for the resurrection issues. Well, every faith has their own excuse like that. So they're either afraid for their next life or they're afraid for this life.
Definitely. So, Anil, I think it goes back to what Bob said, the tiger under the bed, right? That fear, and how can we continue to increase that confidence, to increase the donor pool among even within families? Bob, quick 10-second feedback, and then I'm coming to Dr. Riyad.
I know you want to close. I want to just share this story. I met a lady named Kathleen, attractive woman, late 30s, milk white skin, red freckles, bright red hair. She was obviously Irish, and her name was Colleen Muhammad. She had gone to the Muslim religion. And she was at a conference and she met David Jones. David was a Christian, black man, on dialysis, who had been abandoned by his wife. And they talked, and Colleen contributed a living donor kidney to David. And the operation was performed in one of the largest Jewish hospitals in the United States, Cedars Sinai in Los Angeles. And the date of the operation was September 11, 2001.
Wow.
One of the most heinous dates in American history. Just wanted to share that.
Definitely, yes, and just like how we need to hear the positive stories, as goes back to Dr. Cherry, and I think this would be a great story to be told again and again, even on September 11th as well. Anil, yes.
Yes, sorry. This is where I'm going to seek help and support. Now, you asked me what my book would be named. It's A Punk Who Bought a Caravan. Well, I don't have the luxury of a heavy bank balance to come and do what I do. I've made it a life's mission. I actually have less than $1,000 in my savings account, which my wife keeps, and I'm still at the brink of that divorce because of what I do and how much I've discarded the idea of a safety net around my family. I drive around the world trying to reach as many people with the story of an organ donor and tell them about what life is after and everything else that's associated and everything else we talked about today. I'm able to do this because I get support from people. I actually go begging for gas money. I actually have a hat that I pass around whenever I do my talks in person. And it's a sad situation. I know the National Kidney Foundation, all of them, they get tons and millions of dollars. And people like us who keep doing it, and I have a 501c3 as well here in America and an ATG in India. And I get zero support like that. And there are lots of people like me who do this. So if there's a way that all of us can come together and help, because we're making a difference on the ground.
Yes.
One person at a time, or 15 or 20 or 100 people. My largest group has been 20,000 hearing the story. So find a way to support guys like us. We put a lot of our lives on the line, including donating an organ. And
Definitely.
I walk the talk, and I need your help.
I'll include this information as well on the follow-up email from whoever's been watching, and even our other loyal lists of attendees from Time Just Chat. So thank you, Anil, for what you do, and thank you again. And Dr. Riyad, Dr. Cherry, I'm coming to you, but Dr. Riyad, let's talk about this. I have like 10 more minutes probably before I close out, but very, very important, religious views on organ donation, right? Many wonder about religious views on organ donation, especially even their own faith. Can you talk about, I'm sure you're meeting people of different faith, even in Qatar or Doha, Qatar, but is there any religion that is against organ donation? Or maybe it's a perspective that my religion is against organ donation. Because so far you've said the otherwise from the examples you gave.
Not talking, sorry, I am not talking about the myth and the taboos,
Yes.
because the myths and taboos are so many and they are different across all religions. But let me talk about the core values and core principles in all religions and all faiths are in favor of organ donation.
Yes.
In Islam, it is very, very favorable in favor of organ donation. The first transplant, kidney transplant, in 1954. In 1955, one of a very strict Muslim scholars, he issued a book about the forbidden and the allowed practices. And he mentioned that organ donation and transplantation is saving life, and it is accepted, and it is approved by Islam, and it is not only from living as well as from dead. At that time, there was no from dead. And he said, even from dead. So the problem is that in Islam, there is this what we call fatwa, which means a decree by one of the scholars or a board of scholars. At the beginning, most of the scholars were against. But gradually, over the time, now most of them are with it. And when you notice that there are certain countries, like in Egypt, they don't donate because one of their scholars in 1983, he gave a fatwa against Islam. But the board of Azhar, which is the many scholars in Egypt, they accepted donation. Now we know that in Egypt, living donation is very good, and they have very good liver centers, very good kidney centers, but they don't have disease donation because of that plan. So Islam, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, both of them are Muslim, and they are from different Shia Sunni. Both of them have very good facilities of disease donation, very good program, and flourishing program. So, in general, over the world, for the Islam is now accepted and acceptable. The problem with us, and this is we learned it the hard way, that we didn't know how to tackle this issue with the community. The problem with the community and the newspaper and with the reporters, they always pick the dramatic aspect and the negative aspect, and they put it. Don't do it. It is better not to donate because there is a conflict between this and this. We learned it the hard way. We started to do this, but then we found that if we ignore the negative voices and concentrate on the governmental national board of scholars, then this is the title. Islam is with organ donation. In this country, by law, by regulation, by the medical practice in the hospital, organ donation is a good deed. And whoever saved one life as if he saved the whole mankind. This is in the Quran, in the of Islam. So this is our title.
Definitely, very, very well said. So I'm assuming, because the question I asked also, is there any religion that is against organ donation?
No
and I would
religion.
like to see a nod or a yes, no from any of you all if you all have heard or seen. So every religion promotes and advocates for organ donation. That's really good to know. So I'm going to take that as a yes from all of you. Okay.
The Jews have a divided view on this.
Okay, good to know.
Okay. The Jehovah's have a divided view on this because there is a bloodless. Because I know. Okay, so incidentally, the brother I gave my kidney to, my only brother, he's a neurosurgeon and he does a lot of surgery with the Jehovah's. they come from Africa or other countries to India to get it done. And he's one of the only ones that do it bloodless for some reason. I don't know how that works, but I'm just saying that religious belief is something that has to be eradicated to humanitarian beliefs. With my previous corporate life, I know a very famous Muslim who I asked to tweet about organ donation. He's a sports person. For the Indians in this group, I used to be the CEO of one of the IPL teams. And he said, no, we don't believe in organ donation, so I cannot tweet for you.
Definitely. So,
And
Anil, yes, I think there are always going to be some outliers who are not completely informed and just use their celebrity status sometimes to put the wrong information out there, right? So, with that said, I want to definitely address this one question, and any of you can answer this. Also, do you think there is a discrimination of organ donation for those with cognitive disability? So would they be way down on the list? So suppose even children with autistic disorders, sometimes they might need a heart transplant or anything. Will they be in the lower list than a person who doesn't have a cognitive disability?
No. As a donor pool, they're not allowed to. They don't take it from them, but as a recipient pool, there's no discrimination as far as I know.
Okay. Anyone else? Rachna, go ahead.
So this is just a general statement. Like when my mom got a kidney transplant last year, I mean, for us, as long as the kidney was healthy and it didn't have any long-term implications, right? As a patient, that's all you want. You want a healthy kidney, so you don't care like where it's coming from, as long as it's gonna work and it's gonna keep you healthy and serve the purpose. But I do know that one of the things that we got a lot from our relatives and friends was like asking my mom, more than anything else, one of the common question was, who did you get the kidney from? And so, I mean, from a patient perspective, my mom was like, as long as the kidney works, it doesn't matter to me what race, gender, or whoever this person is. I care about it keeping me healthy, and I'm very grateful for whoever donated me the kidney. I mean, I could not have thanked this person more than anything else. But I think from overall perspective, I think people do question that. I don't know what is the reasoning behind it or what not, but I think that there may be concerns. What if the donor had certain infectious diseases or something that they may be able to pass it on to the patient? What if it's contagious? What if now this person is contagious after getting their kidney, and what if this person passes on to us or anyone that we know? So I think that is probably the concern, because that question kind of raised a lot of alarm for us. Why does it matter as long as the kidney is healthy?
But also, please tell us in 1 minute, what does your typical day look like, and if you can focus on what the MEL score that Bob talked or Brian talked about as well.
Sure. So MEL score is an indication on a score of 7 to 40 on what is your probability of death. It was actually designed by Indian gastroenterologist living in the US called Patrick Kamath, a good friend of mine. And so the higher your score, the higher your risk of death in the next 3 to 12 months. So if you have a score like Brian was saying of 27, you have a greater than 85% risk of death in the next 3 months. So that's how sick Brian was. And then he mentioned the pancreas and various other things, and I really must congratulate his transplant team for having got him out alive. I'm sure he knows how close he was to not. And so that's about MEL. So I have 2 or 3 points. That's why I raised my hand.
Yes.
One is to Anil. So Anil, it breaks my heart that India has probably the biggest cadaver organ pool in the world. And my estimation is that with the amount of brainstem death that we probably have in India, we have enough cadaver organs for every patient with liver disease, not just in India, but in Southeast Asia. Okay? So we should be able to eradicate what I call the disease called living donor liver transplants. That's the first point. So if your caravan is driving by, give me a call. I'll jump on board and maybe we can convince a few more people.
Can I also join?
Oh, you got it. I've driven through Hyderabad a few times, but I can come again.
Sounds good.
I'm doing
So that's
Africa next.
the tragedy of the situation is that despite that fact that I just mentioned to all of you, 75% of the 250 transplants that I have done in India are living donor transplants, and that I feel is a personal. I feel so sad about it. But that is to you, Anil. But then to all of us, I feel that whether we like it or not, especially in kidney and liver, for the next 5 to 10 years, if we are going to save lives, we are dependent on living donors. And therefore, in South Asian Liver Institute, we have created a new chapter, and I would like all of you to join in if you can, in creating the safety, increasing the safety of living donors. And I think that will go a long way, and that comes from who the person is and the legality of it, to the technical aspects of surgery, which is to reduce, for example, the amount of liver that is taken out, to the follow-up and so on and so forth. So I think that's something that we should do something about, and that will go a long way in creating safety for these precious people who have given, despite a risk to their own lives, even though they are fit and well and not patients. And this is a unique situation where a non-patient is having a big operation. And the last point is that preserving transplant recipients, both Brian and Bob will resonate with this. Unfortunately, a lot of transplant patients are losing their grafts for no good reason other than the lack of perfect follow-up. So again, in South Asian Liver Institute, we are creating what I call sort of a support group for post-transplant patients, which is so active in good countries like the US, and I don't know about Qatar, but in the UK, definitely they had great support. But in countries like India, nobody knows. Do they need to be on this amount of tacrolimus? Do they need the tacrolimus levels to be brought down? Is there renal aspects? As Dr. Riyad will tell you, many of our patients develop renal disease because of the immunosuppression. Is that being optimized? So we are trying to create some sort of a support group for that. And I would love it, especially the more of you who join, the more impact it creates. Because all the things that we talked about, from the donors to the transplant teams to the recipients, if they're alive for 20 years after the transplant, then our job is worthwhile.
Definitely, definitely. Very well said. Very well said. On a wait list to be an organ recipient in US, how can friends and family get the word out to potential living donors to help them find a match?
Well, they cannot. Simply, they cannot. It's not an easy. It shouldn't be like that. It will be announcement. It will be. So this is some sort of promotion of organ trafficking. You cannot ask for a match, because this should be in the system. The system will decide where is the match, where the organ will go, the waiting list, and his role on the waiting list. So the family have no role in encouraging the
I would
people
say
at the time of the
No,
yes.
of the death.
that's the Qatari context.
Yes,
This is the
Dr.
US
Riyad. So
question.
that is in Qatar. I would think.
completely disagree with that.
Yes, so
Yeah,
that would
the
be a
US
Qatar concept. Yes, definitely. So, but thank you for letting us know what goes on in Qatar. That completely the system is followed and family doesn't ask from each other. So, Anil, go ahead.
Yes, and I'm going to speak for Brian, and if Brian can interject as well. In the US, the laws support altruistic donations, even to strangers. And it's many stories like that, and Facebook's full of support groups. So I've been helping a few people do the same thing in America. I am an American, by the way, by passport, so I'm quite familiar with things here as well. You can do a few things, Heather. First of all, your family is your closest network. Don't be bashful. Let people know you need it. It's up to them to come forward because it's all about love at the end of the day. You cannot change that system of feeling something. So you don't know who feels for you. Tell your friends, your closest friends, your family first. Then you put out, social media has enough opportunity, and this virality of that also gives you a great shot at it. In fact, I carry a picture of while I'm driving in America right now to do my talks. I saw somebody on the back of their car have in bold stickers at the back looking for a kidney and had a phone number there because there is a phrase in Hindi that loosely translates to in English, it doesn't hurt to ask. So the first thing is just ask and ask as many as you can and let it out there.
Definitely.
Okay?
So just the process and the system, how it can differ from Mid East. I don't know if can that be done in India? Just the ask friends.
It
No,
can be
again,
amongst family, yes,
Okay.
in India.
again, in India, it's very categoric that you cannot donate until you are related. And in a funny way,
Doctor, I beg to differ. I've worked with 3 people so far, and I've moved the High Court of Karnataka, and
no,
I've
no, I
made
know,
available that friends can donate to a friend also now. It's not
no,
blood
no,
related.
I did a transplant in a Catholic father who was not married from another father. So those are exceptional circumstances, less than 0.1% of transplants in this country. And it is generally you have to move heaven and earth to do this, and most people would not be able to. So, whilst there is a clause in the Indian Penal Code that does allow altruistic donation, most organ donation bodies in states would look upon that very severely, and practically it doesn't actually happen. And so whilst it is, as you rightly said, you will not get jailed if you have gone through all the right paths to get it done in our country. But the vast majority would not get the permissions if they are not related. And therefore, in answer to Heather's question, it is very difficult for friends and family to advertise or promote for anybody out there to donate. But I think if there is any amount of relation, so first degree, second degree, third degree, still okay. And that's where I think what Anil was suggesting, somebody who's a third cousin, who's fit and well, who can be motivated to donate to save a life, might make a difference.
Well,
But but in America, that's not the problem.
Yeah.
we have
Tom,
donation.
Mm-hmm.
We have donation. In case today, our case was altruistic donor. But the point that you cannot make an advert, you can talk to the society, you can talk to your friend, to your neighbors. And yes, if we find there is strong evidence that this is altruistic, not paid, not by coercion, then we accept it.
Got it.
Announcement on newspaper or social media is not accepted because this will be a privilege for the rich, and then we will end with,
Got it.
pay.
Understand. Yes, I've seen on social media definitely, at least in the US market, about requiring friends and family asking for a kidney or an organ donation. So, what I would like to do, Dr. Bala, last comment, and then we're going for closing comments, please. I know you all have to take rest. It's too late for you guys. Bob is up from 7:45 in the morning. Go ahead, Dr. Bala.
yeah, see, organ swapping can be done now, Tom.
So
I think,
swaps
Oh,
can be
swapping
done.
can be done. Okay.
So
Yes.
swaps
Cross-matching.
for living donors can be done.
Ah. Oh, good to know. Okay, sounds good. So, Brian, let's start with you on closing comments. And Anil, while on closing comments, you can provide the feedback as well. Probably a few seconds, closing comments, and then please do send us any links or information that you'd like us to add for those who will be reading our follow up.
I'm just grateful to have been a part of this. I was just going to add in that I'm aware of several paired donations that have taken place as a result of social media posts. So, and getting people connected here in the States. So, other than that, the last thing, and I reached out to Anil and let him know what I do allows us to offer any nonprofit a platform to go tell their story to our network. It's free for the nonprofit. It's just something we like to do for awareness. Like if anyone out there, just reach out to me. We'll set it up and get you a big audience and yeah, whatever your move is from the charity side.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian, for your time this morning. And Brian, is it okay to share your email in the email follow-ups? Okay, sounds
Absolutely.
good. Rashna, please go ahead with closing comments.
I think this was definitely a great platform for us to share a perspective coming from a different country, different experiences, and sharing what we all believe in, what we think is going to help increase the number of organ donors. So I think this is a great platform. Something new I learned, Dr. Sharian. Thank you for bringing this up about the MEL score. I definitely wasn't aware. So this is something I'm going to take away from this session today about the MEL score and what we can learn from that. So thank you so much.
And if I'm not wrong, MEL score is only for liver donation. Yes.
Oh, it's only for liver.
It's only for
okay.
liver. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds
So it stands for the Mayo. What is it called? It's a predictor for liver disease. What does the E stand for, Brian? I should know this.
Model for end-stage liver disease.
Model for end-stage liver disease. That's
Okay.
right.
Yeah, and there's also PELD, pediatric end-stage liver disease.
But because it was designed at the Mayo Clinic, the Mayoans claim the M to be Mayo.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. And Brian,
Patrick works in the Mayo Clinic.
Oh, very nice. And Brian, before we forget, what was your person whom you admired or respected? What was her name? What's her name?
Lisa Schaffner.
Oh, got it. You see, we got it. Good. And so now Dr. Teddy won't forget MELD, what it stands for. Anil, go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me over here, Nazeera. I was hoping to have this in person, but this is good enough. But I'd like to make an appeal now. I'm a Rotarian, and the only way I can reach my 1 million people is if I scale this, because at the current rate, I'll be 80 before I get to that number. So, I'm starting a new Rotary Club. I'm chartering a new Rotary Club, which is an e-club. And a Rotary today allows you to do a cause-based club. And if you guys would like to become members of that e-club, which is only going to do organ donation related work in the communities of where the members come from around the world, I would love for you to join this club, and let's scale this so I don't have to spend the rest of my life doing this, but I could have some R&R when I get older from this whole thing. So please become a member of this e-club. Reach out to me. I would love for you to work with you alongside the rest of the gang that's already signed up.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Anil, for your generosity even to your brother to give your kidney. So that is a great.
Oh, there's no generosity. Sorry. He had to pay me.
Oh.
And it's not in money. Since he's a neurosurgeon, I told him he has to do one free surgery every month to pay it forward.
See, that's great.
And he does 3 years, so yeah, there's no
very
free lunch.
Very good, Anil. Pay it forward. So definitely a great job there. Bob, closing comments, please.
I deeply appreciate being here and learning so much from all of you, and most especially Dr. Fadil and Dr. Shirian, and giving us new insight to what goes on at the professional level, and most especially in other countries, which we don't get exposed to. Thank you all, and
thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob. Great testimonial. I hope many get inspired. Dr. Riyadh, please.
Well, I'm so moved by what Bob and Brian has told us. And we meet people with single transplant, but when meeting, it's a unique opportunity for me to meet people with so many suffering and so many nice stories about their transplant. And this is what keep us moving, going on. I see always that drops of tears from the eye of the grateful recipient or the father of a patient who comes with his daughter when you tell him, I have a donor for you, or a drop of urine when it comes from the kidney that you transplant. This is what keeps us moving. It's listening to all these stories. I love what I'm doing, and I hope that we will get donors for all our recipients, and we uh, for the things in India and all over the world, wherever it needs for the organ donation and transplantation to flourish. Thank you so much for this lovely gathering, and I enjoyed it so much. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much, Dr. Riyad, and all of you. Please do read up the special program that Dr. Riyad has facilitated or initiated in his hospital in Doha, and how just the build of trust. And he's called this program. I read about it a bit, so please do read about it.
Is it okay if through Nazeera's permission, is it okay that she share all your numbers with all of us so that we can be in touch with each one of you?
Yes.
So Nazeera, please do share that.
Will do, and you all have the emails. I copied all of you while sending emails. Dr. Okay, definitely. Dr. Cherian, please, closing comments.
No, I think it's been a great session. Thank you for having me. Enjoyed the discussion. I hope it has brought some awareness to as many people as we could.
Definitely. See, I usually called him Cherry, and we were like, just buddies. And for us to be after 20
What
years.
do you mean? What do you mean we were buddies?
We are. We are buddies. I can still call him Cherry, and I still have the pictures of us in the old 20 years ago and now. So I'm very proud to call you my batchmate. Dr. Cherian, and wish you all the best and so many lives and hopes that you are increasing and improving throughout every day. So thank you. Dr. Bala, I know you were really a very kind senior. So Dr. Bala also studied in the same medical school that we all did. I never remember you ragging us or anything. You were always very kind, and you continued that throughout your professional life as well. Dr. Bala, closing comments, please.
Yeah.
And please keep the smile.
Always. So thanks for it. It's a nice program. In fact, we also organize a few like this in India as well. Probably I'll in touch with Tom regarding this, as well as you, Nazeera. And I think we have to keep doing these kind of programs to motivate the donors as well as give them the hope to the recipients. Because a lot of recipients, they doesn't know what is the protocol involved in this. So we have to keep doing this. Then only the medical fraternity and others can give them the information regarding this.
Very well said. Thank you. I cannot say thank you enough. Please expect the recorded session as a link that you can share, and it will be posted on the social media as well for further reach. And if we do receive further questions, we'll definitely respond to you. But I hope that each one of you connect with each other. That's the hope of every Chai and Just
One
Chat.
question: what if a kidney donor needs a kidney in the future? What happens in your respective experiences in your countries?
You want to close out? Okay, go ahead, Dr. Cherian. That's a question.
Well, that's a real question for a donor. If you're looking for donors, we'll answer that question.
Well, as far as I know, there are, for example, in even in UNOS, there is extra points for having a late stage hepatocellular carcinoma. So these are what we call special points. And so I think on the basis of that, there may be special considerations. But other than that, as far as I know, there isn't any legal safety net for donors. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there is any in India. Brian and Bob, do you know of anything in the US? I don't know.
I will talk about India, but I know what's in India. I'll happy to
Yeah.
tell you. But see, the
Nazeera, I did.
awareness.
Sorry, I was gonna say about this. This is interesting because I did read that over here in US, if you are in the on the waiting list, you get some bump up if you have previously donated an organ to someone. So it helps in terms of being on the waiting list.
Okay, sounds good. Anything with Qatar? Anything different?
Kidney, you will be on the waiting list if one day you will be on the priority on the waiting list if one day you become a patient
Oh, wow.
with end-stage renal disease.
Okay, go ahead,
And
Now,
Adam. Thank you.
now globally, this should become the norm, and that's what we all need to fight for.
well,
Yes.
But
it
in
is
India,
it is
in
according to
sorry,
it is according to the guidelines of the WHO and according to the guidelines and the recommendation by the Federation of Istanbul Custodian Group that uh, uh, after donation, end-stage renal failure should get a priority on the waiting.
Oh,
right,
nice.
but it's not implemented in India. It's a statewide subject because health is a state subject. I know Karnataka bumps people like us up to the top if there's a waiting list, but it is not followed by every state in India
Okay.
and other countries also. So if we can work towards
Advocate.
standardizing.
Thank you so much, all of you. Take care. Have a good dinner or lunch, and we appreciate you. And follow us on the journey of Chai and Just Chat, where many interesting topics and networks happen. Thank you. Take care, all of you. Bye bye.